Leitner Museum. Otto Leitner was a wealthy businessman from Chicago. He also had a magazine about hobbies. Apparently, his favorite hobby was waiting until everybody went completely flat and broke from the Great Depression, and then rounding up all their collections of artifacts and antiquities for cheap. Eventually, he ran out of room in Chi-Town because he was kind of a hoarder. So he came down here, bought the former Alcazar, and in 1947 started converting it into the Leitner. The Alcazar was Flagler's second hotel, and that would be the last one that was an ill-gotten gain. I'll tell you more about that when we leave the winery. But if you remember that piece of property I told you traded for that $84,000 church, that piece of property is to your right with the fountain sitting on it.
อันนี้ของสเปนเหรอ
And now I'm about to startle this person in the Honda.
เดียวกันแบบสเปน
อ๋อ
ไอ้นี่แต่ก่อนเป็นโรงแรมแต่เดี๋ยวนี้เป็นดิมเซียมเฮ้ยใส่เกงใน
Ladies and gentlemen, this is our next stop. Please do not attempt to disembark till I come to complete stop and ring the bell. Once I've done so, you can exit to your left, utilizing uprights and handhelds if you're backing down a ladder. And this is the Leitner Museum. And this museum has some pretty weird stuff inside of it as well. And you guys that are getting off back there, have a beautiful day, guys. Remember that Charlie runs every 15 minutes, folks. The last one leaves the station at 4:30. Nobody on, nobody off. This Charlie's in motion.
มันย้ายคนลง
Now, as I told you guys, the Alcazar was Flagler's second hotel. It was also the much cheaper option if you couldn't afford the small fortune it took to book the stuffy old Postelion. In my opinion, this place was more fun anyways, because inside there they had billiards, roulette, poker, blackjack, a dance hall, a theater, and down here at the end of the building, the semi-cylindrical structure was the former deep end to the world's largest indoor swimming pool. That swimming pool stretches this whole city block. On the other side of that were the men's tennis courts. I say men's tennis courts because women were not permitted to play tennis in the early 1900s because it was considered unladylike. I'm sure the guys felt really good about themselves when they didn't have Serena Williams out there blistering 160 mile per hour serves past everybody. And down here at the very end of the street on the left, this building was the former office building where you would go to get your driver's license to operate those ridiculous penny farthing bicycles. If you don't know which ones I'm talking about, they had a 6-foot front wheel, tiny little back wheel. They just looked like rolling concussion machines. You had to have a license to operate those, but not to operate a motor vehicle at the time. Like I said earlier, guys, things were just sketchier. Between penny farthing bicycles, barber surgeons, and unlicensed drivers, I don't know how anybody survived. Now we're going to go down Lincolnville, which is known for its integration and the people's work during the Civil Rights Movement. Over here to your left, we're going to pass the Civil Rights Museum. That's the former dental office of Dr. Robert B. Haling. Dr. Haling was the first black dentist in North America by about a decade. On the other side of that is Cora Tyson's home. She was close personal friends with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. When he would come into town, he would stay at her house. He even signed their family Bible, which you can see inside the museum. And now we are approaching one of two streets in the entire world that are named after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that he actually marched down. The other one is in Atlanta, Georgia. Their traffic is awful. So you can just skip that and come here instead. Now on the other side of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard is the old Yalaha plantation. The word Yalaha was the similar word for orange because this was indeed an orange plantation. This place was owned by P.B. Dumas. He was a local county clerk, and he was a very distant relative of Alexander Dumas, the author of the Count of Monte Cristo and the Three Musketeers. Now, P.B. Dumas' plantation house just sold for $800,000. And I would have a panic attack because it looks like it's going to take about another $800,000 to get it back in working order. Apparently somebody had some money to throw around. It looks a lot better than it did 3 months ago, though. I thought it was going to collapse. Now, folks, down here to the right, this blue building we're going to pass is the former doctor office of Weird Whedon. Dr. Whedon was called Weird Whedon because he was more like a Dr. Frankenstein than an actual medical practitioner. See, he used to take liberty with body parts that did not belong to him. When a Seminole War Chief Osceola died while in his care, he severed that man's head and put it in a jar without anybody knowing or giving permission. He took that jar home with him. He kept it for many years. Think that's bad? Here's the kicker. When his kids would misbehave, he would make them sleep with that jar on the nightstand next to their bed. So I'm pretty sure he didn't have any of those world's greatest dad coffee mugs, and if he did, he bought them himself. That's not even the weirdest part of that story. Moving on. The St. Augustine Distillery is the first craft distillery in Florida. It was a former home to Florida Gas and Lights, which is now known as FPL. If you live here in Florida, you know them and you pay them. On the other side of that is the old ice plant. The ice plant used to service all the Flagler's locations around town. It serviced the local stores and even the local marinas. It stayed in operation for much longer than most ice plants in North America. Now it's one of the great examples of fine dining in this beautiful city, the Ice Plant Restaurant. They have an award-winning chef, an award-winning menu, and they're one of the great examples of fine dining. Everything in there is made fresh daily. They even hand make their own sodas. Now you guys can go inside the distillery and take yourself a tour, and at the end of that tour, they're going to give you some free booze to try. Don't worry, guys, if you overindulge, I'll come back and get you. You don't have to go it alone. I'll be your designated driver. Because inside here they make bourbon, rum, and gin or vodka. Or as I used to call it, college lunch. Now I drive a trolley, so you can probably guess how college worked out. I was playing. In Cincinnati, they let me drive an ambulance, so that's scary. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is our next stop. Please do not attempt to disembark until I come to a complete stop and ring the bell. Once I've done so, you can exit to your left, utilizing uprights and handhelds if you're backing down a ladder. Hello, guys. This is the distillery. And if you think it's a little too early for boozing, it's y'all's vacation. I don't judge. Not out loud, anyways. It's okay. You can get off at the San Sebastian Winery and just walk over, but you should book it in advance because a lot of the times it's all booked up. You ladies have a lovely day. It was brief, but enjoyable. You guys have a lovely one. Maybe I'll see you out there later. That's not a threat, even though it sounded kind of threatening. And for those of you just joining me, welcome aboard. My name is Irish. It's fantastic to see you today. While you're aboard the trolley, please no smoking, vaping, or consumption of alcohol. Keep your hands and feet inside the trolley while it's in motion. And keep conversations to a minimum so that those around you can enjoy the tour. And don't swim until a good hour after you've eaten. Dispatch, this is Irish. I'm at stop 11. I think I have one row open. And confirming that my time in is 1:10. Nobody on. Nobody off. This trolley is in motion. Now, as you can probably discern from what I've told you about Henry Flagler, with his oil company, his railroad, and his hotel, he was the #1 employer in town. But for a while, the #2 employer in town was the Sawyer Kirkaba cigar factories. See, the owners of the Sawyer Kirkaba believed that women, with their patience and their tiny little hands, that they could roll a better stogie than men. So they employed mostly women. The owners also began to believe that women were gossiping too much and it was slowing down production. So they hired men to entertain the ladies. These fellows would do stuff like read books, play music, read magazines, and I will not speculate on anything else. Now eventually the owners fell victim to their own industrial hubris. They signed a contract to produce 5 million hand-rolled cigars in just 1 year. If you look at the size of that building up here and to the left and you crunch those numbers, you might come to the conclusion that the fulfillment of that contract was highly unlikely. You would be right. That's why they're no longer a company and that building belongs to someone else. Now we're on our way to the San Sebastian Winery. First, we're going to pass the Whetstone Chocolate Factory. Henry Whetstone worked for Hershey's for a spell. By work for Hershey's, I mean he created the industrial process necessary to mass produce the Hershey Kiss, Hershey with almond, and other variations of the Hershey Kiss. Now eventually he decides to take his know-how and go elsewhere. I mean, natural selection, anybody? What a goober. Anyway, where was I?
But the Hershey's.
Okay. He opened up his own factory. Now you can go inside there and take a tour, but I gotta warn you it's not free because good chocolate is not free chocolate, especially when it comes from strangers.
Yeah.
One good thing about his chocolate factory though is you can go take the tour and you don't have to worry about that psychopath Willy Wonka. I've taken the tour, he ain't in there. But they have coffee flavored chocolate, chocolate flavored coffee, and frozen hot chocolate. Sounds weird, but it's really good, trust me.